Hey there. Tonight we're stepping into the shadowy halls of medieval healing, where medicine met mystery and miracles were often indistinguishable from mishaps. We're exploring a time when your local physician might prescribe crushed unicorn horn, leeches, or a good bloodletting to cure whatever ailed you. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just woken up in the year 1347 with a splitting headache. Maybe it was the ale last night, or perhaps it's something more serious. Either way, you're about to experience medieval medicine firsthand, and trust me, you might prefer the headache. Your local physician, if you're lucky enough to live near one, is a curious blend of scholar and showman. He wears long robes, carries mysterious instruments, and speaks in Latin phrases that sound impressively medical but often mean absolutely nothing helpful. Medieval medicine wasn't just about healing the body, it was about balancing the cosmos, appeasing the heavens, and occasionally guessing wildly at what might cure you. The medieval world believed illness came from many sources: bad air, evil spirits, an imbalance of bodily humors, God's displeasure, or simply the wrong alignment of planets when you were born. With so many potential causes, treatments were equally varied and often contradictory. Let's start with the foundation of medieval medical theory, the four humors. These weren't jokes, though they might seem amusing today. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile were thought to govern your entire existence. Too much blood made you sanguine and cheerful, but also prone to fever. Too much phlegm made you sluggish and cold. Yellow bile brought anger and aggression, while black bile caused melancholy and depression. Your medieval doctor would examine your complexion, check your pulse, and study your urine with the intensity of a wine sommelier. Urine analysis was particularly important. Physicians had elaborate charts showing dozens of different colors and consistencies, each indicating different ailments. Dark yellow meant too much heat in the liver. Cloudy suggested kidney problems. Sweet-smelling urine indicated diabetes, though they called it the honey disease and had no real treatment for it. The tools of medieval medicine would make a modern surgeon weep: crude knives for bloodletting, metal cups for cupping therapy, and an assortment of herbs that ranged from genuinely helpful to potentially lethal. Surgical instruments existed, but sterilization was unknown. The same knife might cut bread at breakfast and perform surgery in the afternoon, with perhaps a quick rinse in between if the physician was particularly fastidious. Bloodletting was the aspirin of medieval medicine, prescribed for almost everything: headache, bloodletting, fever, bloodletting, broken bone. Well, probably bloodletting, though they might set the bone first. The theory was that removing excess blood would restore humoral balance. Physicians had charts showing exactly which veins to open for different ailments. They used sharp instruments called phlemes, or simply applied leeches and let nature take its course. The medieval pharmacy was a fascinating mixture of genuine medicine and pure superstition. Willow bark, which contains compounds similar to aspirin, was used for pain relief. Digitalis from foxglove helped heart conditions, though they didn't understand why. But for every effective remedy, there were dozens of bizarre concoctions. Powdered unicorn horn was believed to neutralize poison, though what they actually used was usually narwhal tusk or rhinoceros horn, both expensive and medically useless. Theriac was perhaps the most famous medieval cure-all, a complex mixture containing dozens of ingredients including viper's flesh, opium, and various exotic spices. It was supposed to counter any poison and cure most diseases. The recipe was closely guarded and incredibly expensive. Creating theriac was an elaborate public ceremony in major cities, with physicians dramatically mixing ingredients while crowds watched. It probably did very little medically, though the opium might have made patients feel better temporarily. Medieval surgery was not for the faint-hearted. Without anesthesia beyond strong alcohol or opium preparations, operations were brutal affairs. Speed was essential, as patients could die from shock or blood loss. Successful surgeons were those who could amputate a limb or remove a cataract in minutes rather than hours. Cauterization with hot irons sealed wounds and supposedly prevented infection, though it often caused more damage than it prevented. The medieval understanding of anatomy was largely theoretical, based on ancient texts rather than direct observation. Human dissection was rare and often forbidden by religious authorities. Most anatomical knowledge came from animal dissections, leading to fundamental misunderstandings about human physiology. Physicians believed the liver produced blood, that arteries carried air rather than blood, and that the brain was primarily for cooling the body rather than thinking. Women in medieval medicine occupied a complex position. While formal medical education was reserved for men, women often served as healers, midwives, and herbalists in their communities. These wise women possessed practical knowledge passed down through generations, often more effective than learned physicians' theoretical treatments. However, their healing practices sometimes brought accusations of witchcraft, especially if patients died or if they used unfamiliar herbs and rituals. Childbirth was particularly dangerous in medieval times. Maternal mortality rates were staggering, with many women dying from infection, hemorrhage, or complications that would be easily treatable today. Midwives did their best with limited tools and knowledge, relying on experience and traditional practices. Pain relief during labor was minimal, though some used ergot, a fungus that could speed labor but also cause dangerous complications. Medieval hospitals were very different from modern medical centers. Many were attached to monasteries and focused as much on spiritual healing as physical treatment. Patients received regular prayers, confession, and religious counseling alongside medical care. The Hôtel Dieu in Paris, one of the most famous medieval hospitals, could house hundreds of patients in large halls where several people might share a single bed. Hygiene was minimal, and diseases spread rapidly through these crowded facilities. Mental illness in medieval times was poorly understood and often attributed to divine punishment or demonic possession. Treatments ranged from prayer and exorcism to physical restraints and harsh living conditions. Some believed that shocking or frightening patients could drive out evil spirits. Others tried herbal remedies or bloodletting. The few specialized institutions for the mentally ill were more like prisons than hospitals, with patients often chained or confined in terrible conditions. The Black Death, which swept through Europe in the 14th century, revealed both the limitations and adaptability of medieval medicine. Physicians had no understanding of how plague spread or how to treat it effectively. They prescribed everything from aromatic herbs to prevent bad air to bloodletting to balance humors. Some recommended fleeing to higher elevations or avoiding bathing, believing it opened pores to disease. Others suggested prayer, pilgrimage, or moral reform. Despite their efforts, the plague killed roughly 1/3 of Europe's population. Medieval dental care was primitive and painful. Tooth extraction was performed by blacksmiths, barbers, or traveling tooth pullers using crude instruments and no anesthesia. Wealthy individuals might have gold or silver caps placed over damaged teeth, but most people simply endured dental pain until teeth fell out naturally. Oral hygiene consisted of rubbing teeth with cloth or chewing aromatic herbs. Toothbrushes wouldn't appear until much later, and understanding of dental decay was virtually non-existent. The medieval diet significantly impacted health, though physicians rarely made the connection. Poor nutrition led to deficiency diseases like scurvy, rickets, and night blindness. The wealthy suffered from gout due to rich foods and excessive alcohol consumption. Peasants often faced malnutrition and starvation during bad harvests. Food preservation techniques were crude, leading to frequent food poisoning from spoiled meat and grain contaminated with ergot fungus, which caused hallucinations and sometimes death. Pharmaceutical knowledge in medieval times combined genuine botanical wisdom with magical thinking. Monasteries often maintained elaborate herb gardens and produced medicines for their communities. The doctrine of signatures suggested that plants resembling human organs could treat ailments in those organs. Walnuts, which look like brains, were used for head injuries. Yellow flowers treated liver problems. While some of these connections were purely coincidental, others reflected real medicinal properties that modern science has confirmed. Medieval physicians also practiced astrology alongside medicine, believing celestial bodies influenced human health. Each zodiac sign governed different parts of the body, and treatments were timed according to planetary movements. Surgery was scheduled when the moon was in favorable positions, and certain medications were prepared only during specific astrological conditions. While we now know these beliefs were unfounded, they gave medieval medicine a systematic approach that patients found reassuring. The medieval medical profession was highly stratified. University-trained physicians formed the elite, though their education was largely theoretical. Below them were surgeons who worked with their hands and were considered craftsmen rather than scholars. Barber-surgeons performed minor operations, bloodletting, and tooth extraction alongside cutting hair. Apothecaries prepared and sold medicines, while various folk healers served rural communities with traditional remedies. Disease outbreaks were frequent and devastating in medieval communities. Without understanding of contagion, epidemics spread rapidly through crowded towns and cities. Leprosy was particularly feared, leading to the establishment of leper colonies and elaborate rituals for declaring someone legally dead to society. Tuberculosis, typhoid, and dysentery were common killers. Physicians had few effective treatments for these conditions, relying mainly on supportive care and hoping for divine intervention. Medieval veterinary medicine was often more practical than human medicine, since animals were valuable property requiring effective treatment. Horse doctors and cattle healers developed surgical techniques and treatments that sometimes proved more successful than human medical practices. Veterinary texts contained detailed anatomical drawings and practical advice that contrasted sharply with the theoretical approach of human medicine. The medieval understanding of contagion was limited and confused. Some believed diseases spread through miasma or bad air, leading to practices like burning aromatic woods or carrying sweet-smelling herbs. Others thought illness passed through direct contact, leading to quarantine practices during epidemics. The concept of invisible disease-causing agents wouldn't emerge until much later, leaving medieval physicians to rely on observation and guesswork about disease transmission. As we drift deeper into this medieval medical world, we encounter the fascinating figure of the plague doctor with his distinctive beak-like mask filled with aromatic herbs and spices. These physicians, who treated plague victims during outbreaks, wore elaborate protective costumes that they believed would shield them from disease. The long beak allowed them to maintain distance from patients while supposedly filtering dangerous air through the herbs. While the costume offered little real protection, it became an iconic symbol of medieval medicine's blend of practical concern and mystical thinking. Medieval medical education was a curious mixture of ancient wisdom and religious doctrine. Students spent years memorizing texts by Greek and Roman physicians like Galen and Hippocrates, often without questioning or testing these teachings. The human body was considered sacred, making dissection controversial and rare. When anatomical studies were permitted, they were highly ritualized affairs, with a professor reading from ancient texts while a barber-surgeon performed the actual dissection. Students were expected to reconcile what they observed with what the texts claimed, even when the two clearly contradicted each other. The medieval pharmacopoeia included remedies that seem bizarre today, but occasionally contained genuine medical value. Mithridate, another famous cure-all, supposedly contained over 60 ingredients including viper's flesh and various exotic plants. While most ingredients were medically inert, some preparations accidentally included effective compounds. Medieval physicians also used mercury compounds for various ailments, not realizing they were slowly poisoning their patients. The heavy metal would remain a popular medicine well into the modern era. Sleep itself was considered crucial for health in medieval medicine, though their understanding of its mechanisms was completely wrong. Physicians believed sleep allowed the body to digest food and balance humors. They recommended different sleeping positions for different ailments and warned against sleeping too much or too little. Insomnia was treated with warm baths, gentle music, and herbal preparations containing opium or other sedating plants. The medieval hospital system, while primitive by modern standards, represented a significant advance in organized healthcare. Larger institutions had specialized wards for different conditions, separate areas for men and women, and rudimentary systems for patient care. Nurses, usually religious sisters, provided basic care and comfort. While medical treatment was limited, hospitals offered food, shelter, and spiritual support to the sick and dying. Many patients probably benefited more from rest and regular meals than from the medical interventions they received. Medieval medicine's approach to pain management was crude, but showed surprising innovation. Physicians understood that opium could relieve suffering and developed various preparations for different situations. They also used alcohol, henbane, and mandrake root for sedation during surgical procedures. While these substances were dangerous and unpredictable, they represented genuine attempts to address human suffering with available resources. The role of diet in medieval medicine was complex and often contradictory. Physicians classified foods as hot, cold, wet, or dry, and prescribed diets to balance these qualities with patients' humoral conditions. Rich patients might be advised to eat cooling foods like fish and vegetables, while poor patients were told their simple diets were actually beneficial for their health. Some dietary advice was surprisingly sound, such as recommending fresh fruits for scurvy, though physicians didn't understand why these foods were effective. Medieval surgical texts reveal both the limitations and ambitions of the period's medical practitioners. Operations were described in careful detail with instructions for preparing patients, selecting instruments, and managing complications. However, without understanding of infection, blood types, or proper anesthesia, surgical mortality rates were extremely high. Successful surgeons were those who worked quickly and had steady hands, often learning their craft through apprenticeship rather than formal education. As our journey through medieval medicine draws to a close, we find ourselves in the chambers of a medieval royal physician, perhaps the most skilled healer of his time. Even with the best available training and resources, his treatments remain a mixture of genuine medical knowledge and elaborate superstition. He examines the king's urine by candlelight, consults astrological charts, and prepares complex remedies containing dozens of exotic ingredients. His patients sometimes recover, more often through luck and natural healing than medical intervention, but his confidence never wavers. In a world where disease and death were constant companions, the physician's certainty provided comfort even when his treatments proved ineffective. The legacy of medieval medicine is complex. While many practices seem absurd today, the period established foundations for systematic medical education, hospital care, and pharmaceutical development. Medieval physicians' careful observation of symptoms and disease progression contributed to medical knowledge, even when their theories about causes and treatments were wrong. Their emphasis on the doctor-patient relationship and holistic care remains relevant today. Medieval medicine reminds us that healing has always been as much about hope and human connection as about technical knowledge. In an age of uncertainty and limited resources, physicians offered what comfort they could through ritual, relationship, and the occasional genuinely effective remedy. Their combination of learning, tradition, and innovation laid groundwork for the scientific revolution that would eventually transform medicine into the evidence-based practice we know today. As sleep approaches and the medieval world fades around you, you might reflect on how far medical knowledge has advanced. The headache that brought you to a medieval physician would today be treated with safe, effective medications developed through centuries of scientific progress. Yet something remains constant across the ages: the fundamental human desire to heal suffering and the courage of those who dedicate their lives to that ancient calling, whether in medieval monasteries or modern hospitals, armed with leeches or lasers, guided by humoral theory or molecular biology. The candles burn low in the medieval physician's chamber, casting dancing shadows on walls lined with mysterious bottles and ancient texts. Tomorrow will bring new patients, new symptoms, new opportunities to balance the humors and restore health to the afflicted. The physician sleeps peacefully, confident in his methods and secure in his place within the great tradition of healing that stretches back to ancient times and forward into an unknowable future. In his dreams, perhaps, he sees a world where disease has been conquered and suffering eliminated. As dawn broke over medieval settlements, the delicate dance between life and death continued in ways that would mystify modern medicine. The apothecary shops of the time resembled something between a garden center and a wizard's laboratory, filled with earthenware jars containing powdered unicorn horn, crushed pearls, and the ever-popular theriac. This mysterious concoction, sometimes called Venice treacle, contained anywhere from 50 to 100 ingredients, including viper's flesh, opium, and various exotic spices. It was the medieval equivalent of a cure-all, prescribed for everything from plague to heartbreak. The preparation of medicines was an art form steeped in superstition and timing. Herbs had to be gathered at specific phases of the moon, preferably by a virgin at dawn, while reciting particular prayers. The belief was that the spiritual purity of the gatherer and the cosmic alignment would enhance the medicine's potency. Pharmacists, or apothecaries as they were known, spent years learning not just which plants cured what ailments, but the proper incantations to speak while grinding ingredients. Medieval hospitals, run primarily by religious orders, operated on the principle that healing the soul was just as important as mending the body. Patients were awakened multiple times during the night for prayers and confession, as spiritual cleanliness was believed to accelerate physical recovery. The famous Hôtel Dieu in Paris could house over 1,000 patients, often placing 3 or 4 people in a single bed, regardless of their ailments. This practice, while economical, created perfect conditions for cross-contamination. The role of women in medieval medicine was both crucial and controversial. While officially excluded from university medical training, women served as midwives, herb gatherers, and village healers. They possessed generations of accumulated knowledge about childbirth, wound care, and herbal remedies. However, this expertise often put them at risk of being accused of witchcraft, especially if their treatments proved too effective or if they demonstrated knowledge that seemed supernatural to their contemporaries. And so the medieval world turned, suspended between reason and faith, between observation and superstition, where healing required equal measures of herbs and hope, creating a medical tradition that, while often misguided, laid the foundation for our modern understanding that the art of healing encompasses far more than the mere mechanics of the human body.